Welcome to the Deskbound Therapy Podcast, hosted by David London. David is a posture and mobility expert, yoga teacher, and certified online trainer. This podcast is about empowering desk-bound professionals, how to live their healthiest life, and move pain-free. Now, let's dive into this episode.
There's no real sense in going ahead and doing a skill or anything related to fitness that you don't truly want to do. Ultimately, we all get one life. Don't go ahead and waste it on something that you're just going to go ahead and try to get gratification from on social media. Do what you truly love to do, no matter what that is, and no matter what anyone else says.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Deskbound Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, David London, and I'm super excited for today's episode. I'm chatting with my buddy, Jeremy, aka Raymakers Calisthenics on Instagram. Super excited to chat. He's a good friend of mine. We've worked together, and I feel like he not only knows what he's talking about, but he's very good at explaining things, on a level that you can understand in terms of fitness, calisthenics and mobility. So it's great to have you here, and feel free to tell the audience a bit more about yourself and how you got started with your personal fitness journey. I'd love to hear about it.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. As David said, my name's Jeremy. Go by Raymakers Calisthenics most times. When it comes to that, it's just mainly my business name. But myself, I've been doing fitness itself, anything related to that for probably the last 7-8 years total. Started doing gymnastics specific training, particularly specializing in rings. Probably 4 years ago now, closer to 5 at this point. It's getting up there for sure. Like David said, mobility training is definitely a big part of that as well. Ultimately, where I come from is try to basically knock down the potential barriers to entry that come with any kind of related gymnastic strength training modalities, anything around that, but also taking away a lot of the gatekeeping on certain things that you may see on more mainstream content creators, where it's really leaving a lot on the table for athletes and ultimately putting I've heard it be referred to as a reverse ego lifting kind of factor before. And I found that once that was the one thing that was removed from me, that kind of stopped me from being held back in my journey. And I started implementing that with my clients, a lot more progress was made. So that's kind of what my whole mission is to be able to go ahead and simplify it to a point where really at the end of the day, you just got to kind of have a plan set up and execute. And it's okay if it's not 120% perfect form every time.
I really like that you found calisthenics was taking away from the ego lifting, because I remember when I was in my undergrad, I got into powerlifting because my undergrad gym everyone was powerlifting and we had platforms and stuff. So I got into that. And I really enjoyed seeing myself get stronger. But then I realized after a while, after I entered my first competition, I was really just doing it for, just for others to be like, damn, bro, you're strong, or, how much you bench, or there was it was a mix. And I still when I do lift these days, I think about it, it was I wanted to lift, deadlift 4 or 5 because everyone else was. And it was a bit of that ego there too. And it's interesting that, the way we view fitness can change as you spend more time in it, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a really big problem now, especially when it comes to how social media is viewed. I find that there are content creators that are definitely getting better at being more honest on what they have actually in a day-to-day basis in their training versus what is just shown as a highlight reel on Instagram. I feel like that's a bit of an epidemic at this point, and it really paints a negative mindset on all realms of fitness. I've known many people that have gotten out of fitness almost entirely because it turned into a bit of a vanity fest for a while, particularly when it came to bodybuilding. But that's one thing I normally ask clients. I ask myself from time to time even is, why am I actually doing what I'm doing? And am I doing it simply for the admiration of others, or be able to go ahead and post it on my Instagram? Or am I doing it because I genuinely want to go and do this with my body and I want to see the benefits or to see the overall strength gains that come with it? Because I think that in itself is kind of a whole double-edged sword. Strength gains and benefits of fitness should be separate for sure. I can get into that a little bit later, kind of my view on it. But when it comes to, for example, my ring strength, I'm specializing in rings at this point. That is what I am doing from this point. And someone my height and weight, I'm a little over 6 foot, around I think it's in centimeters, it's 189 centimeters is I think what it is. around like 97, 98 kgs or 207, 208 pounds at this point. And I'm working on upgrading my iron cross. I'm just about at the point where I'm doing multis on rings. But before that, it was really focused on, am I managing how heavy my squat is during this time? So, well, no, I'm making sure that my leg strength is being maintained, but I'm not going to go ahead and let some commenter on Instagram tell me that my squat needs to be higher. It's like, no, I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me. And I think more people need to view it that way, and they'll actually be a lot happier with their journey.
Yeah, for sure. And it's true. Like a lot of the other calisthenics pages are kind of intimidating. Like I see guys like jump off like a box jump and land in a planche. And then it really sways away from beginners getting into the sport. And then now you got into the sport from, watching videos on YouTube, which is great. But I find, a lot of the other channels out there, like they're just so like promoting their program that they're not sharing enough actionable stuff that you can use to kind of get started. And there's, some good stuff on YouTube channels and stuff, but I find like, yeah, is what you said, a lot of people are making a highlight reel, and that can be kind of holding back, the sport, because gymnastics was so big, 20, 30 years ago. Like it was in all the elementary schools and all the high schools. And I know it's a bit bigger in the United States, but it'd be cool if we got to that point where, people, it was something more people are doing. Because you don't really see people like, you bring your rings to the gym, I do occasionally, and you don't really like feel like, I don't know if the word's accepted, but you kind of feel out of place. And when you're the only one, and then you're like, oh, should I just lift because everyone's lifting?
Yeah, it's really interesting, that part of the journey, because especially where we're at in Nova Scotia, Canada, right? Like it's almost like we're the black sheep of the community in fitness, for sure. Like I know with multiple gyms that I go to in the city, a couple that I worked at, I'm the only one who ever went to use the rings for more than something just other than stretching. But to your point about how pages definitely are a highlight reel, like I said, I do agree. But I do think it's really going in one direction or the other when it comes to fitness pages. And I'll tell you why. So either they're focused so much on the basics that it brings you to the point, and injury prevention especially, and the word bulletproofing, which I could do a whole podcast on why I hate that word as much as I do. But when it comes to the overemphasis of basics and not enough of specificity when you get to a particular level, granted, a lot of the people that are looking at this content aren't at that level yet. But the problem is for the people that are at that level, people like myself, I've been actively seeking particular coaches to get better at what I'm doing, because everything that's put out there, to your point, is either people just trying to sell their programs and maybe don't know what they're talking about in terms of how to get better at doing a full planche, or getting better at potentially learning one-arm chin-ups and doing it in a proper way where you're not going to get tendonitis. You run into a point where there's no next level. It's either completely on one end with no real experience behind it, or you're in the other end where it's just focused on basics. It's not enough to get someone to the next level. I found that there's a few different people that are okay at that, but I haven't found that, frankly, there's just not enough research to go ahead and show how to properly train for gymnastic skills other than trial and error and having a coach watching you. It's a bit of a hot take for sure, I think, but when it comes to what I've seen, I mean, I've worked with so many different professionals at this point in the gymnastics realm, just to go ahead and pick their brain, that it's really hard to tell if there's any kind of concrete evidence as to what works and what doesn't at this point.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like you made some really good progress in your first few years in. I was wondering like what you would attribute, because like you're able to do weight and muscle ups and a lot of awesome stuff your first year. Do you credit that to your specificity? Because I know when I started, I was, still dabbling in powerlifting. And then I met this guy at the gym who taught me the handstand. After 3 months, I could do it. And then from there, I started, learning the muscle up and doing other stuff. But I never really I was always doing two things. So I feel like it was never super specific. Where I've been really into, the push-ups, pull-ups, dips, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm pretty solid with those basics. But I feel like because I never specified, like I either, was good at the handstand and then bad at the lever, or good at the lever, bad at the handstand. Do you credit all that to like how you've been able to just like have that tunnel vision for so long?
To a degree, yeah. Here, you know what I'll do, David? I'm going to give you a breakdown and kind of like what my training has been,
Absolutely. Let's do it.
what it's been over the past 5 years, and why I've found it actually to work for multiple clients, not only get better at their sets and reps, but just to get better at general strengthening of body weight movements overall. So I actually started out with, long before calisthenics, I was doing things in relation to running long distance, like track and field, javelin, was my main sport. I transitioned over into wrestling. I was doing freestyle wrestling here in Nova Scotia and starting to get pretty good. I was getting ready to compete at like a national level and it was going rather well. But I blew up my meniscus 3 times. So I needed to go ahead and find something different to go ahead and facilitate my fitness needs. So I was in a bit of a lull in my life. I was in between high school and college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew I wanted to do was to find something in relation to fitness that can really resonate with me. Like most people, I think the first person I found in order to be able to start was Chris Heria. So honestly, I credit myself starting out to Thenix and Chris Heria because Thenix was a religion, I was the pastor. Like was so in my blood for sure for many years. Arguably, it still is in some capacity. I think there's a lot of things that people like Chris definitely go ahead and offer to the community. Some things better than others, like everyone though. But when it comes to my journey overall, I spent the majority of my time over the first 2.5 years just on basics at the end of the day. Because I mean, like I said earlier, like basics are still important, but there comes a point where you need to have specificity with a minimum dose, effective dose of those basics to maintain them and make sure that you stay healthy while you ultimately do these skills that may not be as healthy as you think. We can get into that in a minute, why some of these strength skills in relation to health, again, is maybe not in relation to your goals as much as you may think. We can get into that. But when it comes to anything related to like muscle up or handstand, I didn't touch the muscle up. I learned the rings first. I always teach ring muscle up first 100%, just like I was doing with you. Bar muscle up is a lot more about explosive technique relative to the person's body weight versus the ring muscle up, which is almost 99% technique versus power. So when it comes to basics, I started with rows, push-ups, squats, did some split squat work, some plyos, a lot of core, a lot of core, a lot of rows. I did a lot of rows at the start. And to this day, my upper back and my lats are probably my most overdeveloped body part because of the amount of different row variations I did, but it allowed me to build such a base that pull-ups came easy. I didn't do any banded pull-ups. I did a few jumping pull-ups and some negatives. Less than 6 months in, I had 8 to 10 reps of pull-ups. And it wasn't like I was a light person. It was around 175, 180 at this point. So it was not like I was, 110 or even less pounds, doing 8 to 10 reps of pull-ups. Frankly, I don't think that's as impressive, but it's still good. It's just not as impressive. So when I came to that, I took a bit of a step back, focused on handstands a little bit. Horrible form, banana back, wasn't pushing through the shoulders at all. Wrist mobility wasn't there. From that point, I started doing greasing the groove because I was bored in college. I didn't like what I was doing, so I wanted to fill my time. So I did grease the groove. I didn't tackle anything related to muscle ups until I had about 18 to 20 pull-ups with relative clean form. I say relative because I mean chin just over the bar, not chest to bar. Repping out ring dips just fine, working on my ring support. I didn't touch anything in relation to even iron cross until I had a much, much stronger ring support, not even like fathomable how much stronger. But from that point, started adding weight. I was doing 3.5 plates for reps on parallel bar dips and 2.5 plates for reps on weighted chin-ups. And then at that point, few attempts of the ring muscle up, did some negatives, worked the technique, built up my false grip, had it in about 4 months because I had that base. That's the biggest part. If you don't have that base, it's irrelevant because you may just be doing skills that you're not ultimately ready for because there was no kipping involved when I was doing the muscle ups. And when I started doing them, it became very quick. Like going from 1 to 3 was the hardest part, getting the technique down. And then it was 3 to 5, 5 to 8. And then there was points where think I have it somewhere on my Instagram, was repping out a set of 10 to 11. And I was doing 3 sets of 10 to 11 and supersetting it with trap bar deadlifts with 4 plates. Like if you have that base, everything else becomes a lot easier. But at that point, if you want to do something, once you have that base, you need to be specific. Otherwise, you're not going to see the same results as you were. But that's kind of how I got started in that way. I've been talking for a bit, so feel free to chime in at this point before I go any further.
No, it's really interesting because I feel like the period of my life where I was, specific with it, I got crazy results. I remember it was my first year undergrad, and this dude was doing Russian dips when you got on your forearm. And I was like, dude, you're doing Russian dips? He's like, yeah, I don't know what you call them, but and then he, I kept following him around the gym, and eventually he agreed to be my training partner. So I trained with him for a year. He was on the Concordia gymnastics team, and I remember like I learned how to, hang from the bar. I learned how to, move my scapula, and I remember like in that first year with him, I got myself to, we would do during the week, we're trying to get 3 times a week conditioning, and then Sunday would be our skills day to test our skills. So I remember I got to like a single leg front lever for like 10 seconds, and then I got to the point where I was doing like I did 3 muscle ups in a row, and it was crazy. I remember one day he said just go there and keep jumping on the bar, and I did that for like 30 minutes, and everyone started watching. I finally got in there like clapping. I was like, whoa. So I do recall like, when I was the more specialized, that things were just coming easier. But I found though every time I try to do something else, like would be training for sports or powerlifting, I always like, that's how I know it's my passion, is I always want to go back to doing calisthenics. And, I've been lifting a little bit more recently, and now that I'm starting to like, and I've been, and I plan on my lifting around, like my main movement right now I'm working on is like my weighted pull up. And I got it up to like 25 pounds for working sets, which is awesome. But like that every time, like I know that this is like why I'm into fitness, because every time I do something else, I still want to go back to it. But it's interesting that you started with 10x. So I started calisthenics like 2013, 2014. I'm trying to think who the first page I saw, and it's hard to come to mind, but I remember 10x was out of like 3 or 4 years later, but no one specific comes to mind. I think it was just Brandon Wynn on Instagram, honestly, maybe. And I remember he was actually, shout out to him, episode 1 of this podcast. Remember I won a contest, commented on his one of his photos, and I won a contest, and I got coached by him for online, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and then and that was a really good experience. But it's really cool that how like there's definitely a bigger community out there on Instagram for, but I wonder who the OG is. I can't really remember. I'd have to go to my old account and really look back.
God, who's the OG? I mean, Cali Move's been around for a while, but I mean, other than that, like
no, the first video I saw was the Frank Madrano superhuman video. There we go, the superhuman.
You know what? I think that's actually the first video I saw too. It was some combination of who is it? Hannibal for King.
Yeah.
Chris Heria and Frank Madrano. I think you know what? Now that we're talking about, I think Frank Madrano was first and sparked my interest to just type in the big C word, calisthenics, of course, into the YouTube feed, and then just did like a binge for like 12 hours plus.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, I'll put the video on YouTube in the show notes below. It's kind of like, I remember it was the first time I saw a dude do a planche, and I was like, whoa. And like that's probably like my lifetime calisthenics goals, to do a straddle. Like it's just like the coolest thing, and it's just some beautiful movement. And I just remember I saw him do that on those Liebert bars, and I was like, wow. And then I saw the do the rise to the dead handstand. I was like, wow. I think when I was really in my handstand journey, like I did the rise to the dead once, and I was like pretty impressed with myself. But I feel like the way for me is, I don't know if I have the right mindset, but whenever I get a skill, I don't maintain it. I kind of just go to the next thing.
That's such a, I want to dive into that with you, because that's such a big topic, especially when it comes to anything related to very technically based skills. It's very, very important. A little bit more backstory, I guess, for myself. You may know this already, but I guess just for the viewer's sake, I do a lot of aerial strap work as well at this time. I was actually trying to get in and do a few shows in like circus shows, like circus companies that are around here in Canada. Decided to take a little bit of a step back, particularly for this reason, because I have goals that are outside of the realm of aerial straps for the most part, because a lot of what aerial strap skills are a little bit of a side tangent, but pulling focused, and I'm mainly focused on pushing focus skills at the moment. Anyway, when it comes to those, it's really in all skills in general, really frankly, even outside of the realm of calisthenics, anything that's heavily technique based has, I don't know if this is actually like a word, but it's commonly used from what I understand, reversibility. So that is very, very prevalent when it comes to learning skills in calisthenics and in gymnastics. But when it comes to that next portion of reversibility, there's minimum effective dose and there's maximum recoverable volume. So maximum recoverable volume, if I have this water bottle and I go ahead, I can't see it because of the blur. If I'm filling it right up to the top, that'd be my maximum recoverable volume. If I can't do any more, like once it starts spilling over, it's either diminishing returns, higher risk of injury at that point, or frankly, just blanket term overtraining, right? So say if in order for me to get a good sip of water out of this bottle, I want to go ahead and fill it up to the bottle of this logo here. So that would be minimum effective dose. To be able to constantly maintain that skill, you need to find out what are the minimum amount of sets, or if it's like a certain skill that you're doing for reps. Most of the time it's hold times in calisthenics. I mean, like there's like presses and whatnot you can do as well, but generally you can maintain dynamics more by doing other dynamic things. When it comes to the specificity of the static hold, that itself can be dependent on the amount of motor units required, central nervous system as well. But finding what your minimum effective dose is absolutely critical to be able to go ahead and add other skills to your repertoire. You'll see this a lot with competitive athletes, like street workout athletes, or even like gymnasts themselves. If they want to go ahead and say, let's just say they're a ranked athlete. Let's just say that, right? So they want to go ahead and take say they have like kip to planche right now. Let's just say they start inverted hang, and then they go ahead and they do a little bit of a show from the bottom of the rings to the top of the ring. So people who don't know, a kip is basically an explosive version of a muscle up. It's what's actually used in gymnastics, and it actually has a code of points grade around that, and to be able to go ahead and facilitate a score. When it comes to a muscle up, I don't consider a muscle up a skill. I consider it an exercise, because that's actually what it is. Once you're above a certain level and a certain age in gymnastics that kind of coincide with one another, you don't get any credit at all for doing a muscle up. It's basically just a method from getting the bottom of the rings to the top of the rings. So when it comes to any kind of kipping skill, and you go ahead and do that, and you do it, say, to a planche, and you want to say, okay, well, I want to learn how to do like a kip to a Maltese. So basically a Maltese, maybe people know at this point, but a planche is basically you're going to be above the rings. Your hands are going to be in line with your waist. And at that point, you're going to be elevated above the rings, and your whole body is going to be parallel to the ground. Very cool skill, very, very difficult, especially when you're doing a kip into it, because you're adding multiples of body weight at that point on still rings, which makes it exponentially harder. And you basically take a Maltese, and that's doing over double the difficulty. I myself am closing in on a ring Maltese at this point. I'm nearly there. But my planche, whatever you want to call it, is nearly falling at the wayside, because I'm spending so much time focusing not only on ring Maltese, but on other skills. They're very similar. They're eerily similar, almost entirely different. So I need to figure out what's going to be the minimum effective dose, maybe 3-4 sets in total in a week. I just do a couple, banded planche leans, and I just do it at the point where I can lift up into the planche position, hold it for a moment, maybe 5-10 seconds at most, come back down. That'll help me maintain it. Or I can dedicate a whole day to it. That's what some people do. And I think it's really important, like when it comes back to your case, David, when you want to go ahead and start adding maybe straddle planche to your repertoire when you get to that point. And I guess in this case, we can use the muscle up as a skill because it's a technical requirement. If you want to keep that, maybe having it on like a pull focus day where you specifically focus on like the false grip pull up of the muscle up. And then from there, you don't actually press out from that transition position to the bottom. You can go ahead and just like set rings up and like waist height, do the false grip muscle up. And then at that point, as soon as you get over into that bottom position, you just put your feet on the ground and come off. That's what a lot of people do when it comes to street lifting. If they want to go ahead and work their muscle ups, but do dips on a separate day, that'll help you maintain the strength required and the technical requirement for muscle up without straining yourself for a planche. You can apply it to a front lever as well. If you want to maintain your front lever, do a few sets of that through the week. If you want to build up your muscle up as well. Outside of that, I mean, if you want to go ahead and keep a higher consistency level with your skills. If you're going to learn, generally, if you're going to learn skills, don't learn more than 2 at a time. So like planche front lever, perfect example. You have one that's mainly pulling, one that's mainly pushing. If you want to go ahead and swap them out and try to learn another skill in the meantime, so you still have front lever, but instead now you're going to go ahead and learn 90-degree push-up or handstand push-up. You're going to learn how to do that freestanding, for example, because at that point, that's a skill. If you're just doing a handstand push-up on a wall, it's not a skill, it's an exercise. But from there, you're going to have a lot of carryover. That's the other big part, because you're using similar muscle groups, not necessarily the same, because straight arm exercises, specificity is king. But if you're going to go ahead and take a movement like that, better yet, you know what? Scratch that. Not 90-degree push-ups or handstand push-ups. Let's just say you're going to do back lever instead. You want to work back lever and front lever for a certain phase. You're still going to have that carryover. And that's where I think yourself, David, you're going to be able to go ahead and take yourself to the next level. Kind of like chaining skills together to not only be able to potentially put like a little routine together, but at that point, you're able to go and still carry over from one skill to another. And then suddenly after a few years' time, it's going to be very easy for you to be able to go ahead and maintain all these skills. Super long tangent, but I think it's really important to kind of get that out there.
It's cool to hear your thought process, because you're really like knowledgeable about like, you know, traditional gymnastics and, you know, the different movements and their, you know, and their intricacies, which is really cool to kind of hear, because you watch people do it on the Olympics and stuff, but it's cool to hear about, you know, some of the thought process. Whereas, you know, I feel like there's a tiny bit difference between like street calisthenics and gymnastics specifically. I feel like a lot of people out there are just kind of, some people are just, you know, some people just find them easier to come, like the levers and the muscle ups and stuff, depending on their leverages.
Yeah.
One thing I found that was the biggest thing that was holding me back personally was like the fact that there weren't a lot of like coming into Toronto specifically, there weren't a lot of like calisthenics dedicated gyms. And I found it hard to really find a place to train where I felt like at home. I'd always be like using the squat rack to do muscle ups or using the squat rack to do front levers. Whereas like it'd be cool to see like I know like in the summer Toronto has like every week every day there's 5 or 6 parks in the area, and there'll be, you know, daily meetups and stuff, and like it's a really big scene in the summer. But I feel like it'd be cool to have, you know, more dedicated gyms like that. And I know my friend Mike Unbreakable on Instagram, he opened a place in it's called Project Rise in Mississauga, which is calisthenics specific. I'm definitely planning on checking that out. And my buddy in Ottawa, he opened it. It's Ottawa, I think it's Ontario's first adult gymnastics. His name's Alex Kazam. It's pretty sick. Like I feel like that is, you know, where I'd love things to be. And I feel like if I put myself in that environment, like I feel like that's where I could really excel in. Versus like you can only do so much, you know, like if I were to just do calisthenics at home, it's like limited, you know, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, you know, ring push-ups, stuff like that. But I feel like it's really cool to see it growing, and the fact that there's like adult like places you can go and train, and like, and when you're surrounded by that, it really like pushes you to you know, whereas if you surround yourself and your environment's just people lifting, like finding the right area, like the right gym for you, I find is huge. Or even just finding, like I remember after my friend who taught me in my first year of uni, after he graduated, he finished his master's when I was done my first year, unfortunately, and after that we had trouble like aligning our schedules. I just found a friend. Shout out to my friend Sean. He never worked out, and I became the master. He was the student, and you know, we went through the same routine together. And you know, after, you know, a year together, like I got my ring muscle up when I was just training with him, because it was cool. Like we would meet, you know, once or twice a week. We'd go through the routine, and I could push him now, and it pushed me to kind of get better. So it's cool how, you know, how it works in that sense.
Yeah, camaraderie is really important. When it comes to Project Rise, shout out to my buddy Ethan. I actually, if I plan on going out to Toronto, I plan on going out and visiting Ethan. He works there at Project
Oh,
Rise.
see the guy you're working with?
No, Ethan's not my coach. He's just a friend of mine. I'm working with a gentleman named his trainers hate him on Instagram.
Oh, cool.
He actually did just like high school gymnastics in a place, I think, down in Minnesota.
Oh, dope,
I found him by looking at one of the most memorable videos I've ever seen in terms of like like iron cross skill progression. That was like my dream skill, was like learning a cross. So once I had that, it was a video about like the truth behind the iron cross is the big piece. And the other one was like how to upgrade your cross. And I knew this person was like the perfect person to go ahead and work with me, because just like you said yourself, like there's no one around really in Canada. I mean, I was at a gymnastics center for a few years ago, but I was nowhere near the level I was needed to be in order to be able to go ahead and get as much benefit out of having someone with a watchful eye who knows what the heck they're talking about looking at me. So that's really important. It's awesome that the gymnastics center is opening up in Ontario. Hopefully it comes around more. This is more, seems to be like an Eastern sport for sure. A lot in Europe and a lot in Asia.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
there's some crazy dudes. Like you'll see, like there's the World Calisthenics. So Cali's big, like Cali's big, and Europe's big, and it's good to see.
But not even Cali is just big though, David. Like for example, in Britain, my personal favorite gymnast of all time, Courtney Tulloch, works. He is out of Britain, and I mean, he's at the point now where he's setting new. Oh God, he's about to have a third skill named after him in relation to a Victorian cross. He's basically taken the Victorian cross, which is, for those who don't know as well, Victorian cross is arguably the hardest skill to learn in gymnastics in terms of strength. Particularly, it's only done on rings. No one has done it on the floor or anything like that in terms of a skill that would be absolute outlandish levels of strength that at that point you can do pretty much anything you wanted in terms of strength in gymnastics or any other sport that requires relative strength. Anyway, when it comes to that, you're basically taking a Maltese, and instead of your body, your face facing the floor, you're now facing the ceiling. So it uses exact opposite muscles almost to a T in comparison to a Maltese. So this is, if you take a front lever and then you multiply it by at least 4, that's in terms of difficulty of what you have for a Victorian cross. There's this mechanism that's around called a dream machine. So basically what that is you set up a harness and you set up some pulleys, and you touch the pulleys to the harness and you touch the rings to the pulleys. And all this does is you go through the exact same ring exercises that you would normally, but it cuts off about half of your body weight. There are intermediate to advanced athletes that go ahead and work Victorian cross on the dream machine with 50% body weight taken off, still cannot be performed. They still need to add additional bands to cut it down to potentially even 30 or 25% of the weight. So just to put in perspective, if someone has like a decent advanced tuck planche, or like they're bridging in on a strata planche, like David, when you get your strata planche, for example, you could probably hop on a dream machine and bang on a Maltese for 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sick.
That's what I mean. Like it's really, at that point, it's a lot easier. But the Victorian cross, it's just, the thing is with gymnastics, it doesn't require the same muscles for rings, the Victorian cross, as it does for other movements. So why I love Courtney so much is he's revolutionizing what we think is possible. He is taking the Victorian cross and putting dynamic elements into it. So at that point, he's really pushing the envelope of what's possible in gymnastics. But coming back to your original point, I believe it was just about like the availability level of gymnastics
and the community.
Yeah, so there's no community out here in Nova Scotia. We know that. We tried to start the community, and at that point, winter's around right now. It's got, winter's coming, so it's not really available right now. I know myself, when summer comes back around, I plan on getting out a little bit more and getting more people interested in gymnastics itself. Not necessarily calisthenics, more so gymnastics, because there's a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more fluidity, if that makes sense. And it may seem a little bit backward in comparison to calisthenics, because calisthenics, you can do whatever you want, realistically. You can get away with whatever you want. But
yeah, I'm not really into the whole like freestyle bar stuff. I find it kind of sloppy and dangerous. I'm really into just, the main moves, like in the front lever, back lever, planche, handstand. I don't really like watching the guys do 360 spins on bars and all that stuff with momentum. Like, I'm really a fan of like the true, the true gymnastic strength.
If you want to get an idea of how much almost watered down calisthenics can be in comparison to gymnastics, go Google search, YouTube search the World Calisthenics Freestyle Competition of this year, and then go watch the Olympics for high bar.
100%.
That's all I'm going to say about it. Yes, they have a different bar, but the levels of power required in comparison for even just a medium level skill in gymnastics on a high bar is exponentially more. There has been a few athletes I've seen go on record. I don't remember their names. It doesn't really matter on podcasts. I think it was like a Gore Nation podcast or something like that. They're pretty popular too. Check them out. Video is not sponsored. Podcast isn't sponsored by them. So it's just a matter of just like throwing that out there. When it comes to that, really strong athletes, they'll come in and learn a 360 or a 720 spin, whatever it is. I don't even know because I don't really pay attention to it. Learn it in less than an hour. I implore these same athletes to go ahead and learn even just how to do giants on a high bar. So just go ahead and just giants are just spinning around on the bar with your hands and just generating more and more momentum and just learning how to release and catch. Just release and catch and get back into that same giant. Probably will take you 6 months because there's just a little bit more of a technique requirement with it, but also when it comes to how you have to distribute your power where it's not a solid bar, you can get a lot more height out of it. A little bit of a side tangent, but when it comes to, what was the last bit you were talking about there? I think I missed that.
Hi, my name is Sandy, and I work with David with Deskbound Therapy, and I've been a client of his for 1 year and 7 months now. So his mobility work is great. I do his online training as well. I think it's fabulous how, even though he's still not there in person, but you still have the connection and like the corrections of the movements if you need to. He's very much on top of just the program itself, how you're feeling, how your body's reacting to certain movements. There's certain movements that maybe aren't doable for what you're able to do. So he understands that and works with you on that. So I originally had gone to see him with a lot of knee stiffness, and I do have arthritis in my knees. So I am challenged in a way, being flexible and movements and certain exercises and that. His program is great, and he does work with you. And just, like today I'm able to, squat and do deadlifts, and my balance work was actually kind of horrible, but with his work, I'm able to stabilize, and it was one side I would like twist too much and another side, so kind of balanced me out a little bit. So it's fabulous, and I would highly recommend using his program, especially with the mobility. He's always encouraging to stretch and do your mobility work throughout the day, morning, nights, afternoons, at your desk, and so forth. So it's really good. So yeah, it's a good program, so I highly recommend them.
Oh, I was just talking to how gymnastics is a more true form of bodyweight strength and
Yes.
Yeah, I when I refer to calisthenics personally is those big skills, and I feel like freestyle should have its own kind of area, but I really feel like a lot of people can benefit from really actually learning some skills. I feel like a lot of the times at least for me, and even just talking to you the last little bit, I'm pumped. I want to go and do work on my handstand again, because I feel like there's such a greater satisfaction for me, at least personally, being able to move my body weight is just super cool. You can work out anywhere, especially with the pandemic. You don't need to worry about the gym if you can't use the rings. There's always something you can do. But I feel like when you get into skills, I love how when I right now I'm still in the frog straddle planche progression, which is maybe intermediate. I found it's a lot more satisfying trading in hours for seconds, and I'm sure you can relate training the iron cross. You'll train with 10,000 hours to do it for 5 seconds or 10 seconds on the rings. I find that so rewarding and empowering.
It definitely is. When it comes to skill progression, I think it's really important to go ahead and potentially even separate true gymnastics from gymnastics strength training, which is ultimately what I believe what is most accessible for the general population is gymnastics strength training. And that's your human flag. That's one we haven't talked about, but even just your L-sit, your handstand, straddle planche potentially, unless you have some kind of athletic background, going from 0 to straddle planche can be very difficult in your older years. Full planche, 90% of the people, honestly, who are hot take, 90% of the people that are training for full planche are not going to achieve it because the specificity isn't there, and that's okay. But when it comes to things like front lever as well, super attainable. It's probably outside of like hand and like in the advanced skills, I'd say human flag is number one, probably the easiest to obtain. It takes a lot of core strength. That's probably the one that takes the most amount of core strength, frankly, in my opinion. But a lot of understanding body mechanics and how to like push and pull at the same time, basically pushing with the support arm and pulling with the actual pulling arm on top. So overall, human flag is probably the number one. And if we're going to put a hierarchy, number two, in terms of like the more advanced skills, front lever. And then from there, you work your way down. Actually, no, excuse me. I'll take that back. Number three is front lever. Number two is back lever.
Yeah,
Back
for
lever
sure.
is right there with human flag. I'd say they're almost equal. In terms of like general skill difficulty, back lever is exponentially easier. But in terms of how easy it seems that people pick it up, I would say that human flag actually sits at number one. But it's really important to, I guess, keep in mind not only what the expectations are for yourself, but setting out a proper plan in order to be able to execute it. Because there's one thing in using calisthenics or gymnastic strength training to get strong. There's that one piece, but there's also, and like getting, I mean, no one's going to say no to more muscle. Let's just be honest. No one's going to say no to, oh, I want to have a little bit more muscle in my frame. Like I'll look better. There's very few people that I know that would be upset with adding another 5 pounds of muscle on their body. Would you be okay adding 5 pounds of muscle to your frame right now?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Yeah. Likewise. But when it comes to the beauty of GST or gymnastic strength training is you can go ahead and implement that via skill acquisition. So not only are you getting jacked relative to where you are now, but you are also learning things that almost defy gravity in some respects. You go ahead and even do something simply like a handstand at a party. Guarantee you'll have half the room looking. You do a straddle planche, you lower from a handstand to a straddle planche, or God forbid, handstand to a full planche at a party. You're drawing every person in the room, whether it's a dirty look or they're taking a picture of you for Instagram.
I remember when I was in my first year, when I first started, I was like, my goal was to do a straddle planche from the graduation stage.
Yeah.
I never got there, but it'd be so freaking badass.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
absolutely, it would be.
Maybe I'll work on my handstand for my graduation next May and do a handstand on the stage. But
I love it.
my party trick these days, I always whip out the splits, and then the girls try to like do it better than me, and I always do it better than everyone. It's hilarious. And then one time we had a physio party, and there's another yoga teacher there, and we both did the splits together. But then I did like a tuck planche, and I won. It was over.
Tuck planche in itself, I like it and I don't. I really don't. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. I personally don't do tuck planche at all.
Before we get there, though, I know you're talking about like the best way to, not the best way, but what you would advise in terms of like where to go about in terms of learning skills. And I think that's I think that's a really good important point because, like I just wanted to jump into the most flashy ones, but I feel like I didn't have the strong enough base, and that could have potentially been why, I was getting injured because I was trying to do the flashy ones, but I was also trying to learn them all at once. And I feel like like calisthenics, like at least let's say gymnastics for the sake of it, like gets a bad rap for, I guess, promoting injury. Cause I feel like it's so easy to go for those sexy skills and not get your body to the point where it can and do them safely.
That's a really good way of putting it. Sexy skills, by the way, 100%. Because no one, frankly, there's almost no one that wants to put in the work to get the skills. That's fine. You know what? And if you want to go ahead and set it up in a certain way where you can even just do the skills with heavy bands so you can fill your ego, great. But you're not going to progress to doing the full thing, most likely. Maybe in like 10 years doing the same thing, and then suddenly you get it. But even then, it's such a minimal amount of probability that it'll happen. I've gotten a couple questions about this before when I made a post about it a while ago. When I was almost able to just like crank out a one-arm chin up on both sides without even trying. Well, I was just bored in between sets during circus training. So it's something I actually got from Brandon Wynn. So feel free to hand him up and ask him about it more. I've implemented it ever since, and I've tried to get every coach that I've had to implement it in some way because I think it's just it's one of the golden tickets. It's one of the cheat codes that comes with calisthenics and gymnastics strength training, especially when you're starting out and learning a skill. It's the 2/3, 1/3 rule. So I've used this a lot, and I've used this with the majority of my clients when it comes to any kind of skill related training. I used it with you too, actually, when I programmed for you as well. Basically, when you are learning a skill, you're going to spend 1/3 of your time doing specific movements related to that skill in order to build up strength relative to that skill. So that could be technical drills, that could be attempts, that could be banded progressions, that could be negatives, for example, a muscle up. That could be negatives, inverted hang, lower down to front lever through front lever. That could be front lever to chin up, or like an ice cream maker, some people call it, something like that. The other time that you are still in the process of learning how to do the skill, I guess I'll go off on a little sentence here. In terms of gymnastics training, the technical time in order to be able to get credit for a skill is 2 seconds. I don't consider a skill to be learned until at least 3. So basically, if you're starting in like, I don't know, say you're starting in a hang and you're doing a back lever, the timer doesn't start until you stop in the back lever. Not when you lower down, not when you're 45 degrees. You don't start it then. You go, stop, 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I can be rude too and go, stop, 0, 1, 2, 3. Because there's no sense in not doing that. Like, you don't want to go ahead and risk doing it less than 2 seconds if you're going to compete.
Yeah, and I always feel like, I always say pictures or it didn't happen. If you got to hold it long enough to get a photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's at least 3 seconds, and it's got to be at least 3 seconds.
You know what? There's actually a cheat code to do that too.
Yeah,
if
you can
hold
record
a
a
skill
video.
for record a video, take a screenshot. Yeah, okay. And make sure everyone knows that, because there's suddenly so many more people that can do a 1-arm handstand and a 1-arm front lever. Okay, sure you can. Just like do the progressions, get a video, and then show it. Like,
I think we were talking about this. There was that fake handstand page. Like, you can tell when someone just lifts their arm, because you got to be off to the side for the 1-arm handstand. I found it really funny when I realized that.
When you realize that their whole, because I mean the shoulder, the wrists, wrist, elbow, shoulder, hips, and one part of the legs have to be stacked in a certain way. Otherwise, they're not holding a 1-arm handstand. And you need to push enough through the shoulders to do that. 99% of the time, they're like, their shoulders are depressed. They aren't even elevated. It's like, guys, come on, But going back to the original point, 2/3, 1/3 rule. So when it comes to the 2/3 portion, doing specific strengthening exercises, non-specific strengthening exercises, to the point, like these are like your basics, like your weighted basics. So you keep getting those stronger. So, okay, let's just take the ring muscle up, right? So if you're learning the ring muscle up, you're doing, you want to get 2 reps first instead of just 1. So you're not counting it like kipped into 1. You go all the way up to support, come back down, try not to use much of a stretch reflex when you go from the bottom and try to, like, quote unquote, bounce back up. Go back up to the top, the support, boom, you're done. You learn the ring muscle up. Congratulations. So you'll have, when you're learning it, you'll have, depending on your skill level, like your strength level, let's say you can do 10 pull-ups. So you do 10 pull-ups and you can hold a support on the rings. You can be above the rings for 30 seconds, let's just say. So you'll start off with doing maybe muscle up negatives or banded muscle ups, or even you'll go ahead and just work the false grip, being able to go from the bottom of the rings to the top. You need to have that over grip in order to be able to do that. From there, you can work like pull-ups in a false grip. You can work rows in a false grip. You can do something like that, just something related to the muscle up to work the technical pattern. From there, 2/3 of your time, you're doing leg raises, like toes to bar, weighted leg raises, toes to bar, weighted dips, weighted pull-ups, weighted push-ups, bench press, overhead press, squats, Supermans, reverse hypers. You're doing all these other things and getting really freaking good at them. So that way, when you go and work on the skill and the technical element, it's not the strength that's holding you back. It's just the technique. So from there, for the 2/3, 1/3 rule, once you have, for example, those 2 reps on the muscle up, now, if you want to keep getting better at the skill, we'll just consider, again, muscle up for skill for the sport. I'm still a firm believer it's an exercise, but I could be 1 in 1,000. But I've also spent a lot more time in gymnastics gym than a calisthenics.
Yeah, maybe more like a skill-based exercise technique, heavy technique.
Yeah, like heavy technique exercise, but like a front handspring is a skill, a cartwheel is a skill, a double backflip off the vault is a skill, even a V sit, an L sit's a skill, a handstand's a skill, A muscle up is just a way to transition from one to the other. So like the main way to differentiate between that is like an ice cream maker, like a chin up to a front lever isn't a skill because it's not in the code of points. That's normally how I look at it, to be able to actually determine what's going to be used to help supplement your actual training and what will show in terms of strength. Because like there's a little bit of a technical element to it, but when it comes to a muscle up, either you have the strength or you don't. Like there's no kind of working around it. Either you could do the skill, like you have the strength to do the skill and you just need to work on the technique and get the false grip, or you don't have the strength and you just need to do that too. And that's totally okay. It's just a matter of like assessing where you are in that time. But when it comes to the 2/3, 1/3 rule again, when you have that skill and you want to go ahead and start doing more volume for it, you can look at things like doing, well, it's 2/3 of your time is spent doing the muscle up. At that point, 1/3 of your time is spent doing those basics, the ones that we talked about. So you can do like banded progressions. You can do basically anything to get you to the point that you're doing 3 to 5 reps. Once you're doing 3 to 5 reps of a strength, this is very, very important. Anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you want to learn how to do strength movement or strength skill, get it to the point where you can do the progression you're at for 3 to 5 seconds. Once you're doing it for 3 to 5 seconds, you have 2 options, in my opinion. One, you do banded regressions. You take a percentage of your body weight and you go ahead and break it out over multiple sets and you do sub-max holds or sub-max reps. So if you're doing a muscle up, you can do 4, let's just say that. Take a band, go ahead and put it around yourself and do anywhere between 4 and 6 sets of 2 to 3 reps and rest 90 minutes, not 90 minutes, geez, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, sometimes even 3 minutes in between. Just get better at that. Next time you come to the gym, start working on maybe something like 4x4 or 5x5. Do the exact same thing. You do that for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. You go back, guarantee you, I'd put money on it, you've almost doubled your reps and muscle ups because you're working the skill at that point, but you're building specific strength. And then also as a token of that, because you're spending 2/3 of your time doing that, but doing 1/3 of your time doing basics, weighted basics, hopefully you're not slouching when it comes to basics still. They're very important. It's going to be a lot easier to learn other skills now too, especially pulling based skills, because you just learned a pulling based skill, quote unquote skill.
I feel like there's so many intricacies with it. I feel like that's where I've excelled the most, working with, various different calisthenics coaches, like including yourself. Cause like it's so easy to like, I remember once I was just training planche like 3 times a week. And like, I don't know, everything was kind of hurting. I felt like I was just like, let's go train it. Let's just do planche leans, planches. Let's do like, and I felt like I got to a point where I wasn't even doing like a lot of pull-ups or anything like. And I feel like a coach is gonna remind you and make you do the basics to make sure you're not gonna neglect those things. And I feel like whereas I feel like the street workout style is more about just like getting a lot of reps and pull-ups, push-ups, dips. Like it's really about like those 100 pull-ups and really like high volume. Whereas like skill-based stuff is a little bit different in terms of like the approach to training, and both are great forms of relative strength. But I feel like it's cool that there's different ways that people can be, body weight athletes.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Like I thoroughly respect certain athletes in the community. That there's one guy like Max True, and there's another guy named like Saibov. Max True, he's like the world record in muscle ups. He set it, if someone broke it, and then he reset it again with like 5 reps more. It was like 28 or 29 bar muscle ups unbroken. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
He's doing like his endurance sets, like his 10x10 with like 65, like his pull-ups like 65 pounds extra weight. It's ludicrous, right? And if he decided to go ahead and pick up certain skills, if he decided to go ahead and learn how to do planche, he'd probably learn it like that. Because the thing is, he wouldn't have to go ahead and do a tuck planche. He wouldn't have to go ahead and do an advanced tuck planche. He'd probably have to do advanced tuck, but he'd just do like a lot of leans and like straight arm work. And then he'd probably jump right to straddle or full because he has that base layer of strength already. The stronger your foundation is, the much easier it's going to be to learn other skills. If you're trying to learn planche, which is mainly a shoulder and bicep exercise, ultimately at the end of the day, that's what it is. If you can overhead press your body weight for 3 to 5 reps, you're not going to spend probably more than a month on tuck planche because there's just not enough lean to facilitate shoulder activation and bicep activation relative to what is actually demanding demand is, excuse me, for even an advanced tuck plunge. And for those who don't know, tuck plunge, hands on the floor, starting to push up position, lean a little bit forward, shoulders past your wrists. From here, all you're going to do is squeeze your glutes, tuck your knees into your chest. Assuming you're leaning far enough, it's less than 10 degrees of the tuck plunge. That's why I don't normally program it for people, because it doesn't carry over anyway. But if you want to do a tuck plunge, totally fine with you. Your feet will lift up off the ground, assuming you're keeping your knees tucked and tight to your chest, and you're keeping your arms locked out, and you're pushing into the ground. Assuming you're doing that, and you have the shoulder and the chest, excuse me, I only said shoulders and biceps, shoulder, chest, core, and lower back engagement, you will magically be in a tuck plunge. So when it comes to that, if you have a very high base level of strength, you may not need to do the tuck plunge again for more than a month, because you may already have the shoulder strength to go ahead and facilitate a higher level of lean. But when it comes to anything related to straight arm strength, you may just need to build up your bicep tendon more, which is a totally other concept. You could dedicate a whole podcast to straight arm strength.
Definitely, we'll have you back to chat about straight arm strength for sure. But it's
Yeah,
interesting.
for sure.
I really like. I'm just kind of checking out some of your videos, and for those watching, he's actually got like videos doing some cool ass shit. Like I've never seen anyone rep out muscle ups with 60 kg, so it's pretty cool. But another thing I thought was cool is, I know since we've been talking a lot about muscle ups, like when you see like someone like Mike in his form, it just like no momentum at all. I feel like that's really cool. Like the way like some of the guys can do a pull up, like, and actually get to their chest or to their waist, and just the way that you can take a skill from looking sloppy to actually like improving and make it look nicer and cleaner, I find is like really appealing too, because like it's progress in and of itself is like doing something with better form than making your own kind of technique, then making it look like making it look easy is like, I find is just super cool.
If you can do multiple I commend Mike so much. Him and I've chatted very briefly. We follow each other. Because I followed Ethan. Ethan told Mike about me, and then Mike reached out. We chatted for a little bit. That was that. But when it comes to Mike in himself, I mean, I've seen some of his videos in terms of like unbroken bar workouts, and I mean, I don't know how many rounds I could do, frankly. I don't know if I want to try personally, but I mean, I greatly commend people who have the levels of dedication required for something like continuous muscle ups like that, because that's kind of a con when it comes to endurance-based sets and whatnot like that. They can be more mentally taxing than physically taxing. And I find that a lot of people who specialize really run into this problem where it's monotonous at times, day in, day out, same thing. I experience it now, but I'm sure Mike does too when it comes to his muscle ups and doing like toes to bar in between and whatnot. Excuse me, apologies. But when it comes to his pulling strength,
crazy grip strength for sure to start off.
Grip strength for one, but his lats and core are ridiculous. But he's also like, have you ever seen Mike like up close, like at all? Like, have you seen like on video up close at all? Dude's jacked.
I know he's shredded, and he's like he's gotten a bit leaner, which has helped. But I'm not sure how tall he is. I haven't actually met him.
Neither have I personally. I know I saw him at like, there was like this like a video, an IGTV video of, what's it called? It's like a calisthenics like reps competition with weight, and dude's diced. Yeah, absolutely diced. I can't maintain that level of body fat year round. Not a chance.
But the interesting is, like, there's guys who are just lean and light and can get muscle ups and other skills like relatively easier. But I find it pretty impressive, like guys like your size, guys like, who have like, have some muscle in their frame, and they're still able to, to build strength without letting that, I wouldn't say big excuse, but letting that, letting that extra weight deter them from pursuing like body weight skills. Like, whereas traditionally in gymnastics, you're around my height, you're 5'4" or shorter, are the best guys in the world. But it's cool to see, and even like, fitness FAQs, he's like pretty tall and he trains legs heavy. He's got big legs. He can do a lot of skills. It just takes a little bit more, time, determination. But when you have that more like muscular athletic frame.
First of all, thank you for saying I got muscle. Appreciate that so much. A shout out to you on that one. Looking pretty big today too, bro, as well. Do a few push-ups and lateral raises before we get on today.
I did.
Bless your heart. But yeah, no, when it comes to anything related to muscle building at this point, I mean, 90% of my strength and muscle at this point is coming from skill acquisition. I'm trying to work up to the point where I'm upgrading my iron cross right now. Trying to make it basically where I can do just from a hang, go through front lever, go through a back lever. It's basically a backward roll and land into an iron cross, and then eventually a backward roll landing into a Maltese cross. So right now, that's what I'm working on. It's called an Azarian to cross and Azarian to Maltese. So I actually just got some pretty dope equipment today to be able to go ahead and help me out with that. That's why I have Joey, the coach I have now, to be able to work on that. But I mean, God, even the last 4 months alone, I think I measured it. I've put like 3 inches on my biceps just from doing straight arm work and blanche work.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really liked your post the other day because most people like I kind of like I remember talking to Christopher Summers a few years back, or I saw a post about him, and it was actually an article on T Nation. He was saying, gymnasts have the biggest biceps because of the huge, force going through straight arm skills. And then I talked to my buddy at U of T, who's like studied exercise science, he did his master's, whatever. And he's like, there's no way you can grow muscle doing isometrics. I'm like, well, I don't buy that. I'm like, look at Brandon Wynn, Jake Dalton. He's my favorite gymnast. Like his arms are absolutely nuts, like bigger than his head when he was in the Rio 2016 Olympics. And I find it so cool that you can just, it can be more of a byproduct of building that strength than having to just like personally, like I prefer to do weighted chin-ups than to do curls at the gym. I find it, a lot more, functional and more fun.
When you mean when it comes to building biceps?
Yeah. Like
okay.
I rather do something more skill-based to get there as well. Like whether it be like you said, do a planche or just to do some, weighted chin-ups. I find that like a lot more fun than just kind of doing, that kind of motion.
Curls are essential.
Yeah,
I'll say that flat out of the gate. When it comes to pretty much any athlete, if they require, like anyone doing a sport of any kind, if they require their biceps to any level of, I don't know, let's just say difficulty, intensity, whatever you want to throw in there.
Yeah, like first off, just for like tendon strength alone and shoulder strength too.
Yeah, you need to do curls 100%. If anyone listening right now, and if you're not doing curls because you don't think it's something that you need to do in order to be able to live a happy, healthy life, I strongly disagree. Same thing with doing tricep work, because you want to make sure your elbows are healthy. And at the end of the day, if you're not keeping your elbows healthy by training the muscles that facilitate that joint movement, then you're potentially going to run into issues down the road. When it comes to, I know you have a thought, but go ahead, because I might go on a little bit of a tangent.
One thing I just want to say is I remember when I was powerlifting, there was such a stigma. Like if you train your biceps, you weren't a true powerlifter. I remember like you get like a weird look at the gym. And then I like after I like became a trainer, I realized like training biceps is so important, even just because like it attaches to the shoulder. Like, and there's just so much stigma. Like it was like, oh, let's be skinny and super strong, but like no one would train their biceps. And you just see these guys like injured all the time. Like whether it be like those elbow things on, or like it'd always be the guys who would making fun of it, who'd be like making fun of like doing bodybuilding stuff if you're powerlifting, who are injured. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
100%. And it's ridiculous to not train part of your body. Like I still, like, just because I specialize in rings, that doesn't mean I don't train my legs. I do it 1 day a week, and I do it hard when I do it. But also what I do is I do weighted mobility to help with that as well. And that's where the majority of my hamstring growth has come from. But getting into the topic again of like chin-ups, biceps growth, and like bicep curls, I actually gave a very reputable channel that we've talked about on this podcast already a little bit of stink when it came to saying that your main reason your biceps aren't growing is because you're not doing chin-ups. That is my one. It's in the top 5 for sure of my least favorite things about training methodology, or just training modalities, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Minimalistic training is going to be the death of some athletes' careers, bar none, because you flat out are just not going to get enough stimulation on your biceps without doing curls. There's no like pride element that comes with it. Yes, there's EMG studies saying that there's more bicep activation when it comes to doing chin-ups versus pull-ups. But I can tell you from personal experience, for not only myself, but for 2 other clients that I've had as well in the past, we did not do arm work because they didn't want to. And I said, okay, I gave it to them to program them. And then they'd send me exercise videos for everything else but the curls. I'd ask them where they're at. Said, didn't do them. Don't think they're necessary. So you know what? I can only lead a horse to water. You don't want to do them. They're coming out. And then people start to wonder why they're a torso dominant lifter, why their arms are lagging, but they're doing weighted chin-ups and they're doing like 90 pounds or 40 kgs for reps of 5 to 10 for 2 to 3 sets. You need to do curls. You need to do them. It's simple that there's no reason not to. I still do them now. And I still, what's the word? Oh my God. I still credit most of my biceps growth to straight arm strength, but the curls is what's keeping me like healthy at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's just like I find it funny, like, you know, if you want to get fit, you want to get strong, just, you know, focus on, you know, even like I always say, like the area that you don't train in and the exercises you don't do are the one you're most likely to get injured doing. So it's good to be, you know, well-rounded and train a variety of things. But like yesterday, so maybe Monday, for example, was like my pull day. And I started with those weighted chins, but then I did like every single combination afterwards that you could do for biceps. Like I did, you know, I did cable close grip, then I did, you know, cable wide grip. Then I did some hammers I go a bit heavier in the hammers to build the forearms. And then when we were done there, we did some, you know, some really lightweight, just kind of slow eccentrics for the elbows. And I find like, I don't know, I just find it fun. There's so many variations you can do, especially at the end of your training. That ways you can kind of hit things at different angles. But I find like one thing I thought earlier in my calisthenics career, probably I don't know if I think I had that ego. It's like, I'm just going to do calisthenics. I'm never going to touch fucking weight. And I feel like I made my best progress when I did supplement it with it. Whereas because I just wanted to be like, yo, I got jacked, I got big, and I can do these skills. And I did these skills and I was like, you know, I didn't ever lift a weight, and I took pride in that. I was like, I remember I was on a date with this one girl and she's like, your arms are so big. I was like, isn't it awesome? I don't even do train arms. And like, she's like, okay. And I just felt so cool, but really it's just like, why am I bragging about that? It's funny looking back.
No kidding. I totally get that. I've had that as well. Back when I was more of a torso dominant lifter, I know that I've like I have a tattoo sleeve on my right arm. And I remember like, it was like the, you know, also common, you roll up your sleeve and you flex a little bit when you do it as well. And I ended up getting a number that night because of it, which was kind of funny to myself. This was years back. But at the end of the day, I don't know, I keep just want to like throwing out like PSAs for any like, you know, athlete or anyone who's in the gym that's like, that has maybe certain false pretenses when it comes to the fitness industry. Do your curls, do your tricep extensions. There's no medal you get for not doing them. There's no medal you get for not doing your face pulls, for not doing a couple sets of your rotator cuff work. You don't get any medals for not stretching. You don't get any medals for not training your legs. You don't get any medals for not training your upper body. Just, you'll benefit from it in the long run. I highly suggest you do it because it's going to make sure that you stay happy and healthy for the rest of your life. And of course, we all want to look better, right? We all want to feel more confident, and we have most people have certain inherent body parts they gravitate toward to go ahead and accentuate their physique. Mine are my shoulders and my back for sure. I really want to have like, you know, ring boy shoulders. It's what I want to have at the end of the day. Getting there, not there yet.
It's ring boy summer.
Ring boy summer, exactly. I'm so excited. I'm hoping to crank out Nazarian 2 Maltese next summer. That'd be ideal. If I can crank out a Nazarian across, that'd be sick. Yeah,
just before we wrap up here, I'm gonna let the listeners know, you know, my goals to put it out there. Yeah. So next summer, I want to do 3 L-sit muscle ups on the rings. That's I'm gonna put it out there for the accountability. And then I'm gonna get my handstand back to 30 seconds. So I'm only picking 2. I'm not going crazy. And then, you know, the listeners will let you know how it's going. But, you know, I'm putting it in the universe, so it's gonna be achieved now. I just gotta commit.
I love that for you, bro.
Is there anything else you wanna add, just like for the listeners to know, about you, where they can connect with you, or any kind of final remarks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess first off, thanks, Dave, again for having me. Really appreciate it. Love to come back on at any point, a few months
Absolutely.
online or whatever. Talk about a little bit more about straight arm to bent arm. That'd be a pretty interesting conversation. Especially with what your buddy said about how you can't build muscle with isometrics. The entire U.S. Olympic gymnastics team begs to differ. But that's another point entirely, right?
We should have me and Brandon win on one episode. That'd be fire.
Oh my God, I'd love to connect with Brandon. Anyway, Raymakers Calisthenics. It's RAYMAKERS and then CALITHENICS. So to find me on the old IG there. Email address if you want to go ahead and reach out to me, book in a consult to see if we can do either any in-person training here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or if you want to go ahead and hit me up on Instagram or email me there for a consult to go ahead and do anything online as well. I do also nutrition programming as well. I am actually specialized most in exercise nutrition, mainly focused around people who want to go ahead and help themselves out and optimize their exercise routine. That's where I mainly specialize in that way as well. Otherwise,
I'll have all his info in the show notes below, guys. All his website, email, any Google Forms to work with him. All that will be in the show notes below. If you didn't catch that, it was really a pleasure, and it's good as always to pick your brain and to catch up with you. I feel like we could kind of go on for 3 hours here, but we'll end it with that, and definitely want to have you back on. I think the next thing we could do is make some content for the listeners, some videos or something for the Insta to kind of accompany this podcast, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for coming on. It was a good chat.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for having me. This was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great.